Hello YouTube, I'm Murray Carter of CarterCutlery.com and welcome to part 4 of Carter Cutlery Japan Tour series. This part is called Carter Cutlery Japanese Artistic Gentleman Bladesmith. Now just for your review so that you can find the others on YouTube, the first in the series was called Carter Cutlery Japan Tour. The second was called Carter Cutlery Best Japanese Bladesmith Visit. We've got some outstanding footage of some great knives being forged. Part 3 in this series was called Carter Cutlery Best Scissors Factory Visit. So, as you know, we made a tour to Japan this past October. We're going on another one this coming October. And we arrived in Tokyo, had a great visit with Mr. Okayasu at Okayasu's knife shop. Got a lot of history on some knives and custom knife market. Then we went to the Shozaburo Scissor Factory, which is can be highlighted in part 3 of our series. And then we went down by rental car to Sakai, Osaka. That's where we filmed our Carter Cutlery Best Japanese Bladesmith Visit series, which actually comes 2 in this sequence. From there we went to visit Mr. Ashi. And the visit with Mr. Ashi is what we're going to feature in the following few minutes for you. Mr. Ashi is an extraordinary gentleman in that he's one of the few bladesmiths that I met in Japan who is able to run a financially viable bladesmithing shop with high production, paying several people's salaries, and yet he has a very definite artistic bent as well. He's so naturally curious about metal and how it can be forged and all the different shapes it can be forged into that he can't quite contain all his interests just in knives only. So he earns his living and pays all his bills through the bladesmithing, and he makes excellent European style cooking knives, mostly all out of Swedish carbon steel or the Japanese Hitachi steels. But in his spare time he likes to open the envelope or broaden his horizons by experimenting with lots of different architectural ironwork and decorative ironwork. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Ashi has literally traveled the world. I think he's been to Israel, he's been here to North America, and he's attended several, not just bladesmithing, but general blacksmithing, like artistic blacksmithing symposiums. And so while we visited his shop, he took great delight in showing us his photo album, and we looked at lots of his different works as well. Our visit started with a tour of his shop. Now, I've been to his shop 3 or 4 times in the past. I've been there to learn specifically surface finishing of the what I call my International Pro Series knives, where we put a full polished finish on a blade from the spine of the blade all the way down to the primary cutting edge. And that's not typical for a lot of Japanese knives. A lot of Japanese knives leave the patina or the hammer marks on them or the forging evidence on them. But the European style knives have a full polish, and that's one area of expertise that Mr. Ashi is particularly well known for. So I think as early as maybe 15 or 17 years ago, I had visited his shop, and I visited back subsequently many times. When I traveled there this time, last October, with my group, we started with the factory tour. And one thing that's so amazing about Mr. Ashi's shop is how he can fit so much heavy equipment into such a tiny space. And you'll see in some of the photographs, there's barely room enough for 2 people to walk past each other without bumping into each other in the aisle between the 2 sides of heavy equipment. There's also a set of stairs that goes up to a little cubbyhole attic in which there's probably another 5 or 6 grinding and polishing and buffing machines lined up in a row on a bench. And if you're not sitting in a chair, I mean, you've got to squat to get up there, and the only way you can be up there comfortably is if you're sitting, because the roof is literally 4 inches above your head when you're sitting. So he really has made use of all the space possible there. Some of the machines he has, as is evidenced in your photography there, are power hammers and different Japanese water stones and 3 or 4 different press machines where I call them hydraulic presses. They're not hydraulic, they're mechanical presses. And he'll use those like Mr. Shiraki does in the best Japanese bladesmith video that we did, for punching out steel, for cutting out the shapes quickly and efficiently, and being able to cut out the same shape time after time after time. To walk through Mr. Ashi's shop with him beside you and to look at these powerful cutting tools is a sobering experience, because Mr. Ashi, one of his hands looks like this. And he makes all his knives like this. He's got one good hand and the other one's all curled up like this. And many years ago he sheared off all the fingers on his hand on one of these. And they've sewn him, all the fingers back on, but he doesn't have full range of motion. And he makes knives that way. Bless his heart. He certainly does the best with the situation he's in. And cheerful, so cheerful. He's always cheerful. And after we had a tour of his shop, which didn't consist of any kind of knife making per se, just a general guided tour, we then took him out for lunch and asked him what restaurant he recommended. And so we ended up going to a kaiten sushi, which is one of those rotating sushi restaurants where we got to see each dish of sushi as it kind of passed us by, and whatever caught your fancy you could try. And taking 4 foreigners over to Japan for the first time and letting them all try sushi, although they'd had it here in North America, it was a pretty adventuresome lunch. We had a great time. From there, before we returned back to his shop, we stopped off at the Osaka Hamono Kaikan, which is the Osaka Cutlery Museum. And there we get to enjoy a wide variety of static displays where we could see the 8, 10, 15 step process of making different styles of cutlery. You had from the raw billet of steel all the way to the finished product, all basically attached to one board, one display board. And there was just, as you'll see, there's just display after display after display of all different kinds of cutlery products being made. And that was really fascinating, especially for anyone who's interested not only in the knives themselves, but how they're made. Something else that we saw in the museum that was a little disappointing, enough that I'm going to make a point of it here in this presentation, is they have a video there in English for foreign visitors to sit down and watch that explains the process of how a Japanese laminated blade is made. And unfortunately, in the interest of making it visually stimulating, they've actually kind of blown many of the steps of the sequence out of proportion. For example, in the opening step you see the bladesmith heat the steel up so hot that when he pulls it out of the pine charcoal fire, the steel is just sizzling, looks like a 4th of July sparkler, just sparks flying everywhere. And then when he hammers it, it's like almost half the steel disintegrates. And when I pointed that out to Mr. Ashi, I said, come on, that's not the way a knife is made. You're misleading the visitors here. You ought to show them how it's really done, which is heat the steel enough so it'll perfectly forge well, but without any sparks. He said, but for dramatization, everyone wants to see the sparks. I said, it's not the way I would film it. So that's the one critique of the museum there. And then they said that the fire was raging hot, that the bladesmith's fire was 750 degrees Celsius. And I said, no. Actually, that fire is 3,000 degrees Celsius, not 750 degrees Celsius. He said, it's just TV. It's just for entertainment. So that I would like to see changed. Otherwise, an absolutely fantastic museum where you can learn a lot. I saw some sharpening stones there, and I had actually traveled to Japan with a dull neck knife, and I was kind of worried that somebody might ask to look at it, and it was not as sharp as it could be. So when I saw some stones there, I took the opportunity to get a freebie sharpening in there and put a razor sharp edge back on there. From the museum, we moved on to another a couple of different shops that Mr. Ashi knows, and we kind of just gleaned a little bit of knowledge and information from some of the different specialists in that Osaka Sakai region. Some guys were doing just sharpening, some guys do just the punching out of parts. And then we went back to his shop, and I had brought over a kitchen knife that I was slated to deliver to a customer over in Tokyo, and it didn't have a finish on it that was to Mr. Ashi's specifications. And he looked at it and he felt the edge, and he was impressed with it and everything. But then he said, "Would you like me to refinish this knife for you?" And so I thought it was a great opportunity for not only myself to get a refresher, but for the whole crew to get a feel for the whole process of refinishing the surface, not doing anything metallurgically to it, not doing anything that involves heat or time, but just the polishing process. And so he went through like a 20-minute procedure where he re-ground and repolished this blade that I had brought over for delivery. And that was a real good object study lesson in how to polish a blade. And polishing a blade, as many of you will know, is nothing more than getting all of the scratches in the blade perfectly aligned so that it's a nice consistent finish without any high spots, low spots, or imperfections, inconsistencies. Something that's also notable about Mr. Ashi's shop is the steepness of the stairs. You'll see some pictures of the stairs, and it must make you shudder to think of running up or running down those stairs with a box of freshly sharpened razor sharp knives. But that's very common in a lot of the Japanese houses. At the Osaka Hamono Kaikan, it was a pleasure to see a little gate around a static power hammer display area that had actually been made by a gentleman named Shihan. Shihan is a young apprentice bladesmith who has literally traveled the world in pursuit of general purpose blacksmithing, and specifically Japanese bladesmithing as well. And he came and he stayed and worked with me for 3 months, and to see some of his work that was still in Japan was pretty neat. In Mr. Ashi's shop, he has 2 power hammers. It's an interesting contrast because the 2 hammers that are side by side represent an older version called a spring hammer, and a newer version which is called a belt hammer, which is like the one that I use in my current shop. After our great afternoon with Mr. Ashi, he was so kind to take us to the local hotel and to stay with us until he was sure we were all checked in and settled in, and then we had a really great picture taking time with him. We said goodbye, and for the rest of the evening we just talked amongst ourselves as to his kindness and to his refreshing approach to mixing the artistic blacksmithing with Japanese bladesmithing. Look at the even though that's all steel, you can see the grain. The grain in the steel looks a little bit like Damascus. Mm-hmm. You can see in here. Yeah. And here. He's not too interested in doing what everyone else is doing. Exactly. And he really enjoys tackling new projects. Unique, very unique. Yeah. There's just something about handling a large forged blade with a high polished surface that makes you grin. Well, thank you for watching part 4 of our Carter Cutlery Japan Tour series. And we look forward to bringing you part 5, which we'll have in a few weeks here ready for you. And until then, this is Murray Carter from CarterCutlery.com.